Hello and good afternoon. I want to extra heartily welcome to everyone participating in today's webinar. I'm delighted to host this webinar. I'm Heman, a Senior Research Associate at South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, an organization having the vision of defending the rights of minorities in South Asia. We aim to highlight the plight and victimization faced by marginalized minority communities and to break the chains of hatred, violence, and intolerance once and forever. Today we will discuss role of regional organization in achieving interfaith harmony in South Asia. According to a report released by minority rights group International, violent practices have reached critical levels today. South Asia has a massive diversity of culture, ethnicities, religion, and beliefs. With diverse communities and societies, misunderstanding and conflicts among different groups are always possible. South Asia is no exception, be it criteria, communal violence, language threats, or religious discrimination, or caste discrimination, or marginalization. Therefore, there is a dire need to start efforts in the promoting interfaith harmony among these groups to attain social cohesion. Most possibly, this can be achieved through the will and efforts of regional organizations. We are promoting the significance of social harmony in peace building. So moving forward, we have fantastic series of speakers. Let me give a quick review about them. Our speakers are Dr. Sanam Roohi from Germany, Dr. Leslie Martin from India, and Radha Bheel from Pakistan. Our first speaker is Dr. Sanam Roohi. She is an Alexander-born Humboldt Fellow at the Center for Modern Indian Society, Indian Studies, University of Goettingen. As a social anthropologist, her work emphasizes the themes of embodied migration, infrastructure, global resources flows, and their ramification on caste and religious infected community. Formation within Indian diaspora. Roohi is on editorial board of Comparative Migration Studies Journal and a member of Kolkata Research Group. I would like to invite Dr. Roohi. Thank you very much for joining us today. Over to you, Dr. Roohi.
Thank you so very much, Heman. And I am also very glad that I came across your institute for the first time. I am presenting my work here, and it's a great honor. I have seen some of your videos when you sent me the link a couple of days before. So I am in very esteemed company, and I'm really very appreciative of the kind of work you are doing as an organization. So having said that, I also want to add a disclaimer. So I am from a minority community, though I have not done sustained research in this area. But during the pandemic, when we were forced to be, idle, and I went online at that point in time, there was a very vicious form of Islamophobia going on online. And I realized that actually I should dedicate myself to it, do some kind of systematic research. And then what I embarked on is what I refer to as virtual ethnography. I hung out on Twitter for a long time, took notes, made participant observations. And today what I'm going to present in front of you is based on 6 months spread over 3 months and 3 months in 2020 and 2021, 6 months of field work, online field work. And I think it is an important discussion to have while offline and real-time violence are on the increase. You have already pointed it out, Heman. I think it is also important for us to pay attention to the virtual world where a lot of discourses are being shaped, a lot of narratives are being built, and these narratives are taken to be true by ordinary people. And what we need to do is break these narratives, definitely. And before I start my presentation, I want to say one more thing. I think it is the responsibility of these big tech companies, especially social media companies like Facebook and Twitter, to actually, when you say the role of organizations, I think they really have a very crucial role to play in arresting this form of both symbolic and epistemic violence that is actually going on at the level of social media, where the social media becomes the platform which ferments all these kind of hatred between communities. Having said that, I'll quickly start my presentation. It is a little bit academic, but I hope you will bear with me. So you can see the presentation, right? Yes, let me begin. So what I'm going to today speak about is a form of online Islamophobia that spread during COVID-19. And what I'm trying to argue with that is actually it is in these moments of crisis that the fractures of society come out in the open in multiple and various forms. And while at an ordinary level they continue on an everyday basis, they continue, but in these times of crisis they accelerate, they multiply, and we have to be very watchful of them. So I'm going to give you an instance of how things really accelerated and went out of hand on social media when the pandemic hit our subcontinent and particularly India. So in the early days with rapidly shifting epicenters, before even countries could adopt policies to contain the spread of COVID-19, as you all know, one of the first suggestions from experts was to maintain strict hygiene and avoid large social gatherings. And this approach quickly developed into a policy response worldwide called social distancing that had put almost half of the world's population as early as April 2020 into some form of restrictions. In India, where instances of everyday violence against marginalized groups, and you as a organization are expert in that, continue and are very common, the manifestations of social distancing in this instance were layered, distinct, and volatile. And they were not just online, their repercussions were felt offline as well. So as a norm, what is social distancing? I think there was a lot of critique coming from Indians because they were like, we are used to social distancing. We don't do physical distancing. What you are referring to is physical distancing. But we, with our caste and religious-based customs and norms that heavily regulate social interaction, are already, unfortunately, very used to social distancing, real social distancing, not just mere physical distancing. So what happened is, people were also wondering, when the pandemic came about, maybe xenophobia, etc., will sort of perhaps retract. And there were some scholars who had written about it because this is a global catastrophe. So maybe, people will think as one, as humanity, as a whole, but that was not to be. And what happened is in India, when this social distancing came into being, concerns were raised about the implications of the policy on the cohesion and social solidarity for a country like India that, as you all know, is already fragmented along the lines of caste, class, gender, religion, and of course, language as well. So in this presentation, I draw from research, as I already mentioned, through media content analysis, digital ethnography, etc., that I conducted between 2020 and 2021. And I followed regularly a few key Twitter handles from among the groups that actually self-referentially term themselves as Hindu Twitter and also Indian Muslim Twitter. And while there is a lot of internal divisions between them, what unites them is that the Hindu Twitter supports the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party ruling India, and the Indian Muslim Twitter actually is very much vehemently opposed to this ruling dispensation in India. And what happened is when I followed, I realized that the interventions, resonances, and amplifications of India's religious inflected somatic well-being via the digital infrastructure, and in this case, Twitter, led to kind of a socio-economic boycott of Muslims offline. So it started online, but it resulted in offline boycotts. So what I argue is that this signals how the Hindu right has enjoined newer meanings to the policy of social distancing, where it's not just merely about boundary making. I am A and you are B, othering of groups, but no, it's much more. It's had percolated to become to that level where it was about the denial of citizenship rights. And not just that, it actually devolved into denial to partake in everyday acts of life that reproduce social life, like earning a livelihood for yourself. So I want to quickly tell you, you all are aware, I don't want to go into the details about what do I mean by somatic nationalism. Hindutva, which is the ideology that the current dispensation in India adheres to, goes back to the 1920s. And drawing inspiration from fascist movements in Europe, the RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the fountainhead of Hindutva, espoused a kind of a very somatic or bodily or corporeal imagination which collapsed the idea of the health of the nation, so the health of the Indian nation with the health of the Hindus. And this concept of bodily cohesion, as you will see if you read the literature, is not just very peculiar to this party. Even the Congress in some way had adhered to it. But while their rhetoric was secular, so, the health of the nation and the health of its people and, those kind of somatic nationalist ideals were devoid of religious overtones for the Congress. As we all know, for the BJP, it was not the case. So historically, and particularly in the last decade or so, this has led to the relegation of Muslims and Christians to the outside of this body politic. And while the othering of Muslim is historical, as we all know, it started in a very crucial way. It started during the colonial period. What happened under Hindutva is that there has been a kind of a pathologization of Muslim that's going on. Muslims as pathologized, like as infection, as diseased, as problematic to India's body politic. This pathologization, has only become normalized. So while it was there, it was hidden under the cover, it was never coming out so viciously. Today, and especially with the proliferation of social media, this pathologization has become absolutely normal. And coupled with newer forms of Islamophobia that's going on all across the globe, it has increasingly rendered Muslim citizens as outsiders and suspects. So against this backdrop, I want to say when the sudden imposition of the lockdown happened, you all might have the memory of that. This was in 2020 March, when our Prime Minister called for the lockdown. A two-pronged narrative emerged in the social media. And this was about Hindus who were warriors, who were fighting the virus, and Muslims who were spreaders, who were actually contaminating and spreading it everywhere. As elsewhere, with its proclivity to amplify affective truths and marginalize historical and scientific facts, the right-wing populist regime in India deployed infodemic during the two waves of COVID in remarkably different ways. And this is very interesting. In the first wave, when people of Tablighi Jamaat, who had actually gathered for their annual meeting in Delhi, were found to be infected. And remember, this is the time when only a few 200-300 people were infected in all, and most of them were people who had actually traveled from outside to India. So what happened is suddenly a few Jamatis were found to be infected, and the whole media, social, mainstream, and all kinds of media, they deflected the attention from this, and the attention suddenly went to these Tablighi Jamaats. And then what happened? So obviously, as I mentioned, what happened is, because of their what was the discourse that was being built was that because of their religio-cultural practices, Hindus were sort of safe from the virus, but nevertheless there were these Muslims who were actually, especially Jamatis, and then over time Jamatis became Muslims in general. They were spreading the virus deliberately, and the Hindu right, who calls themselves as Hindu Twitter or HT, they started deploying the metaphors of war, fighting, defeating, and killing the enemy, that was the virus. And all of these metaphors of war actually converged within the Muslim body. When the news of the Jamaat exploded and in the social media platforms, the fight against the virus, as I said, turned to Islamophobia. Anti-Tablighi hashtags that devolved into anti-Muslim hashtags trended on Twitter during this period, castigating Muslims as outsiders and traitors who needed to be crushed. Memes and posts on social media pathologizing Muslim bodies proliferated, where instances of Muslim piety, such as offering namaz, was perceived as impure, anti-national, and an act of deviance. The narrative of a Muslim body as an infection to India's body politic took a very definitive hold online. Mainstream media outlet condemned Jamatis for committing a crime against humanity. And even progressive news outlets propagated the same imagery. As you can see in this cartoon. The first picture is from Online Hindu Portal, which is a progressive media house. And they also projected the virus as somebody dressed like a Muslim, perhaps like a Taliban. So very unfortunate kind of imagery going about. So by doing so, what was the Hindu Twitter doing is they were creating a kind of a discourse about a healthy Hindu body, and a healthy nation, where the Muslims were actually seen as a contaminant, as I've already said, and it indexed a new layer of meaning to the policy of social distancing, one that promoted the socio-economic boycott of Muslims in real time. So there were many examples put on social media and elsewhere, even in mainstream media. It was almost a daily phenomenon, daily recurrence, that Muslims were beaten up, said that you cannot sell in our area. Drivers were like, Uber drivers or Ola drivers, like we don't want Muslim drivers. We don't want to purchase anything from Muslims, etc. I want to quickly tell you about the second wave. So this is about the first wave. In the second wave, when actually now it's no more a matter of hundreds, it's a matter of lakhs of people getting infected. You all might be aware that there were quite a few events that were happening in India in early 2021. One is the Kumbh Mela, which happens once in 10 years. And interestingly, Kumbh Mela was supposed to happen this year. But because of some astrological reasons, they pushed it to 1 year earlier. And the other was the election in 4 important states in India. Now, what do both of these things have? What do both of these events commonsensically, what would you imagine when you think about it? Obviously, large gatherings, millions and millions of people gathered for the Kumbh Mela on the one hand, and on the other hand, there were, again, hundreds and thousands of people who had actually gathered for all these, rallies, election rallies that were going on in different parts of India. What is very interesting is that the government minimized the risk. So, and now in retrospect, they say, no, we didn't. But actually, they did minimize the risk. So if you see, this slide as well. Majority Indians have natural immunity. This was said by the advisor to the Prime Minister, and the advisor who was advising on the COVID policy. And if you say these kind of things, that Indians have natural, immunity because of their sacred geography, as some of the, WhatsApp forwards were saying, or because of the vegetarian food they eat, or because of the practices they have, it's because of these things we have natural immunity. So we are not going to die. This was the idea. But then unfortunately, and very, very sadly, we all know what happened. The whole situation spiraled out of control. Millions were killed. And some people say that official estimates are so underplayed, up to perhaps even 30 times underplayed. So millions and millions of people actually died in India, unfortunately, some immediately, some over the course of time. Yet, what was the Hindu rights response online to local and global criticism of the handling of the second wave? It varied. On the one hand, they said it was the conspiracy by China or Pakistan. They were actually saying, so actually nobody's dying. This is all conspiracy by China and Pakistan. And on the other, they said this is all to derail India's growth. And this is the left, which always, they are anti-national. They don't have any commitment to their country, which is not true. They don't have the commitment to their country. And therefore they are, spreading these kind of things. So on Twitter, in the face of mounting evidence of government mishandling, the Hindu Twitter rhetoric changed, varying from calling the virus as a weapon deployed by India's enemy to tarnish the country's global standing or to weaken its citizens from within, explaining and sometimes even this happened. So, that the virus was nothing more but just a rumor causing a health panic in the country. When newspapers from across the globe started showing pictures of devastation, the response was very weird from the same people who were actually accusing the Muslims of spreading the virus when there were just a few hundred infected in the whole of the country of 1.4 billion. This time they started changing the discourse and started saying that, oh, you are doing porn pandemic. And, she's one of the very prominent handles, Shefali Vaidya. She said that, when the picture of many people and their burning pyres, dead people and their burning pyres were posted, unfortunate use of term by Annie Govan, I understand. But then rather than reflecting, rather than thinking what our country could do better, how can we handle as citizens? It was like, don't show these images. By showing these images, you are actually indulging in pandemic porn. So I think I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to conclude quickly. So what I have tried to do in my very brief presentation here is, I have first tried to say that, there is an understanding that technology, once it comes, it is very disruptive. Maybe in bits and pieces, yes, it is very disruptive. But actually, what we see, which is a bigger concern for us, is when the technology, social media, internet, when they interface with the post-colonial Indian state, and I'm sure it is also true to some level about other South Asian states, what they have done is they have congealed and conflated somatic well-being of the majority with the health of the nation, thereby relegating and making the non-majority groups, the minority groups, as outsiders, suspects, and as anti-nationals in a very extreme case. What is very sad, however, is that in this process, what happens is both Hindu and Muslim as categories, they become reified, emphasizing the distinction that Hindus and Muslims have nothing in common, which is not true. We have a shared identity, hundreds of years of existence together. And what happens in that these commonalities are downplayed, and some very mediatized understanding of our differences are, sort of reified. And then what happens is when these groups who are constitutionally equal citizens, whose histories are intertwined, then are relegated to a further marginalized, minoritized position. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roohi, for an enlightening presentation. You helped us understand the pressures and marginalizations faced by minority, specifically how pandemic and social media added to the misery. With that, I would like to turn it over to my co-host, Purkho. Purkho, to introduce other speaker. Over to you, Purkho.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Heman. Now I would like to invite Mr. Leslie Martin. He is Dalit women rights activist from Hyderabad, India. Hand over to you, Mr. Leslie.
Good afternoon to all panelists. And I am from Hyderabad. I basically talk about from the personal experiential happening that are around the topic. I have been involved in Dalit human rights monitoring over the years, in which caste has divided each community, each group of people into not untouchables, and wherever they go, in their own places they experience an untouchability, but wherever they go, they repeated that experience. Which is also spreading across the globe. In terms of the prosecution against minorities in South Asia, it started with Dalits being discriminated and excluded and violated, denied education and all over the years, over the generations. And with the education reservation and education, constitutional education that they got, we could see the blatant form of violence that was happening to Dalit assertion. Wherever there are educated Dalits or well-off Dalits or intellectual Dalits, they'll be condemned, or they have a violence on them, and including women and girls. And every day, around 25 atrocities take place in India, in which about 10 against Dalit women who face sexual violence, and 3 are children, Dalit children, who face sexual violence and harassment. So that is a scenario in which we were living in. And when the pandemic started, so it manifested even more. The ugly face of the social distancing, the word social distancing, and already as the previous speaker said, different caste groups that were facing, different minority groups that were facing, and different women were facing at that time, and domestic workers, especially domestic women workers, they were targeted. And the kind of a public health discourse that was happening around all the bodies of the WHO or Indian Medical Association or Indian Health departments, it was blatantly stigmatized the Muslims. That was happening to the Muslims. So health and the stigmatization is a normal procedure in any public health issue that comes up. That needs to be addressed by the public health discourse. But in terms of the basis for that, it became the religious religion for stigmatizing. So in that context, Of course, the world has suffered. We know about it and we have experience about it. And during the pandemic, it was targeted attack on the Muslims, and at the ground level, the Dalits and Christians were facing the social distancing impact. They were not allowed to enter into some lanes, or their hamlets were targeted and police were there. Whenever they were coming out, they were beating, saying that it's lockdown, why are you coming out? So it was targeted violence. Even the state violence also was also there on the. And another thing that even during that pandemic, atrocities on Dalits did not stop. For want of food, there was an atrocity. Even if the food is cooked by in a community center where the migrants were taking shelter, the food is cooked by Dalit cook. It was not accepted by the upper caste cook people that they were staying there. So these are the kind of incidents that were being faced by the Dalit community within the in India, and also the kind of whole migration, migrants that took to streets, that took to roads, showed that the myth of spreading the spread of the virus as envisaged by the health department was has made it very, very significantly minimized, because these are warriors. They have traveled kilometers by walking, and they were stigmatized, and they were brought into isolation, and they were subject to testing for virus, and they found out that it is not in them. So this was the myth that did not get even publicized, and denotified tribes who travel from different locations as their regular life were stigmatized, and they were brought into one location. They were tested, they were isolated and tested for about 10 days, and their livelihoods were destroyed. So the police were attacking the women. Within the 10 days, there were sexual violence on the women of the denotified tribes. So this did not see the mainstream media, or this did not come out into the mainstream media. Of course, locally we had a lot of activists around that time who were active, and they were addressing these issues. But what the present scenario, if you look at the global level, especially after 2014, and also at the US elections, and also around the globe, the kind of supremacy of either white supremacy or Hindu Brahmin supremacy has taken roots, has taken shape, and is getting manifested. If you look at from the untouchability point of view, they are like cleansing, like in untouchable, as though the 75% of India rules, the Congress rule, whatever the governments rule, were not up to the mark. It has to be cleansed. That is the kind of program that is going on now, even at the US, where if you look at wherever the authoritarian regime is established in the countries, that is the kind of scenario that is happening at present. So what is at present this system is doing is, they have systematically, institutionally started attacking minorities, Dalits and Christians. So that is one thing happening. And they have started institutionally changing the scenarios of narratives by keeping their people in the heads of in the committees and also at the various levels. So that's one of the things is national education policy, which talks about like building up world-class leaders, but it is based on mythology. It's not based on scientific evidences. So the syllabus and the structure are not based upon scientific evidences. So that is one thing that which we have to very carefully reflect upon. What these marginalized groups, which are already marginalized, are being attacked, who are being prosecuted, what is going to happen and how the scenario is going to be. Of course, the fight is there, the struggle is there, but the struggles are not getting manifested into reality. They're being severely obstructed, including judicial obstruction. They're being harassed at every level. They're being harassed. In all institutions are being used for harassing this kind of liberals, or whatever the assertiveness that is taking place. So in this context, as the world has experienced the pandemic and the inequalities have shown up, thrown up very vividly across the globe, the religion aspect has been clearly shown its space. Like, if you look at what has to happen, every religion has to look at its textbooks, its scriptures, look at its scriptures, has to deeply understanding of, has to look at from the spiritual point of view, what those texts are said about man and woman in the world, in the global world, and what it talks about the nature, how the nature is presented in the scriptures, how the nature is worshipped in the scriptures, how man and woman are created, and how it has been built to enabling environment, a loving environment, a peaceful environment that has to be brought in. That needs to be reflected upon each religious institutions, faith-based organizations, and including the countries' representatives who are sitting in UN, United Nations level. So those aspects have to be reflected upon spiritually. And now, what has to happen? There is already an inequality of gender in the world, and there is a patriarchy. So that needs to be addressed systematically by bringing together man and women of different sexual orientations, so that they can share their lived experiences, how they got into through that kind of a behavior from the scriptures, from the religious scriptures, whether Christianity or Muslim or Jainism or whatever the Hindu scriptures that are there, how they got infected into their minds and how they have fought it. They're fighting it on everyday life because it's patriarchy. It's an everyday fight for women, for girls, and gender reality is everyday fight for all sexual oriented period. So that needs to be reflected upon, and there should be a healing that needs to be worked out by the different religious faith groups. And Hyderabad is known for communal rights. Hyderabad was known for communal rights 20 years back. But in 2000, as Dalit organizations, when we came to Hyderabad, the faith-based organizations came to us, said that whenever Ganesh Nimajanam happens, or Vinayak Chaturthi is there, or Ramzan is coming, there are communal clashes that are happening. And the police commissioner was also in the discussions. So how do we can reduce it? So we took up a year-long activity of doing voluntarily going to the locations, sensitive locations, taking with the permission of the police, and discussing with the community how rights can be thwarted, what role the community has to play. So that has fetched over the years. We have played that role. That has fetched. That has played a greater role. So that kind of a role now again has to be initiated with the kind of antagonizing governments that are there at the region. Now, another deep question that the religious authorities have to look at it is that at human level, how can conversations take place? And how one can address bullying that is coming from religious scriptures or patriarchy or gender discrimination or child rights violations. How that can be conversed for a solution. So how that kind of a human level talk can happen between man and woman and different sexual orientations and children and girls. So across the globe, that is the kind of programs I think that they have to take up. And now it's also kind of a budgetary provision should be made for this kind of work to take place by the different organizations, faith-based organizations, which are working towards the peace of the world, and especially social media and mainstream media. The media, right from the beginning, if you look at from generations, it was in the hands of the upper caste only, Brahmins only, those who have been reading and writing. They have been allowed to write and read, and they are the narratives that go on. So from that, how the subaltern narratives also can come in, how the spirituality subaltern can come in through the social media. So social media is a platform that can be used vigorously to bring in this kind of social harmony groups into gather in the social media, because that's the only platform that we can have before going into the mainstream media. So with that note, I thank the Institute for giving me the opportunity for this presentation of my talk from the experience that I was going through.
So thank you very much, Mr. Leslie, for sharing insight views. Now I would like to invite Ms. Radha Bheel. She is Dalit Sujag Tehreek Coordinator, CEO of Radha Organization, and social activist and human rights activist from Sindh, Pakistan. So please welcome Ms. Radha ji.
देखिए, इस वक्त तो पहले तो मैं सबको सलाम नमस्ते जय भीम कहूंगी, हमारे जो भी पार्टिसिपेट हैं। और दूसरा ये है कि जो हमारे इदारे हैं उनकी तरफ से बहुत अच्छा अभी इनिशिएटिव लिया जा रहा है, और खास तौर पे हमारे सिंध पाकिस्तान जो गवर्नमेंट है उसने भी बहुत अच्छा उसने काम किया है और कर भी रही है। और इदारे जो हैं जैसे कि लॉ पे जो इदारे काम कर रहे हैं, जैसे कि एलएडी या इस तरह के जो भी एलएस या इस तरह के जो इदारे हमारे काम कर रहे हैं, या ह्यूमन राइट्स पे जो वो काम कर रहे हैं, वो बहुत अच्छा जबरदस्त काम कर रहे हैं। लेकिन इशू तो है, ये बात नहीं है कि इशू नहीं है, इशू है। और जहां पर आपका कमजोर तबका या आप कमजोर होंगे वहां पर तो इशू होंगे। तो ये नहीं है कि इशू नहीं है, इशू है और सॉल्व भी हो रहे हैं और इशू बढ़ भी रहे हैं, और उनके ऊपर जो हमारी गवर्नमेंट है वो भी काम कर रही है, इदारे भी बहुत सारे जो है ना उसके ऊपर काम कर रहे हैं। अब कोशिश है कि इन चीजों को जो है निपटाया जाए। लेकिन अब क्योंकि एक तो हम जो है वो गरीब तबका है, गुर्बत है, उसकी वजह से भी हम हर जगह पे हमारे साथ डिस्क्रिमिनेशन या जो है इस तरह का मतभेद होता है। और दूसरा ये है कि जो एक कमजोर बंदा होता है उसके साथ तो काला गोरे के साथ या फिर जो है ना इस तरह की जो है वो मजहबी भी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन या फिर इस तरह के जो इंसानी हकूक पे जो काम कर रहे हैं वो भी लोग हमें बराबरी का और इस तरह दर्स दे रहे हैं। अभी मेरी रिसेंटली मुलाकात हुई थी हमारे इस्लामी काउंसिल वालों से, तो वो जो हमारे मसाइल थे वो भी मैंने उनको बताए थे इस्लामाबाद में कि हमारे साथ ये डिस्क्रिमिनेशन है, या हमारी बच्चियों को अगवा करके ले जाना या उनको बरगला फुसला के ले जाना या इस तरह की जो भी चीजें हैं उनके ऊपर अगर हम आवाज उठाते हैं तो हमें कुचला जाता है। या फिर अभी आप देखें रिसेंटली आप 2 दिन की बात देखें कि 10 जो फैमिली है वो माइग्रेट हो रही है। तो मैंने कहा ना इशू तो है, तो इशू की वजह से जो है ना काफी सारे ऐसे लोग हैं जो कि माइग्रेट करके जा रहे हैं, जिनके पास ज्यादा पैसा है वो तो आउट ऑफ कंट्री मतलब दूसरे कनाडा है, ऑस्ट्रेलिया है या अमेरिका जा रहे हैं, पर जिनके पास कम पैसा है तो वो जो है वो पहले तो यहाँ पर हमारे जो ट्रेन चलती थी उस वजह से जो लोग काफी माइग्रेट कर रहे थे, लेकिन अभी थोड़ा सा उसमें कम इसलिए हुआ है कि अभी ट्रेन नहीं है, तो जहाज या जो बाय एयर नहीं जा सकते, लोग गरीब है, तो इस वजह से थोड़ी कमी आई है। लेकिन जो हमारे कास्ट हिंदू हैं वो फिर भी जा रहे हैं। तो अब ये है कि डिस्क्रिमिनेशन या इस तरह की जो है वो चीजें हैं। अभी 4-5 दिन हुए हैं कि हैदराबाद में एक केस हुआ है जो कि 10-12 साल की बच्ची है, उनके साथ जो है वो निकाह किया गया है या उसके साथ शादी की गई है, उसका अभी तक कोई जो है वो कोर्ट के थ्रू या कोई हमें अभी तक जो है वो इंसाफ नहीं मिला है। तो इस तरह के जो वाकयात हैं, या फिर जो हमारे जैसे सेठिया लोग हैं या जो कास्ट हिंदू हैं उनके पास पैसा ज्यादा है, तो उस वजह से उनको जो है वो उनकी ट्रैफिकिंग होती है या वो मिसिंग पर्सन होते हैं, उनको अगवा करके उनसे जो है जो पैसा छीना जा रहा होता है या उनको मर्डर उनका किया जा रहा होता है, या जो लोग जो है वो थोड़ा सा पैसा उनके पास होता है तो फिर वो टारगेट होता है उनका बाहर के दूसरे मेजोरिटी का कि भाई ये इनके पास पैसा आया तो कहाँ से आया और आया तो क्यों आया। तो फिर इस वजह से भी जो है ना हमें बहुत ज्यादा जो है वो तकलीफ और सामना करना पड़ता है। लेकिन फिर भी हम शुक्रगुजार हैं अपनी गवर्नमेंट का, जो मुख्तलिफ जो है लॉज आ रहे हैं उनके ऊपर इम्प्लीमेंट भी हो रही है, तो उस वजह से जो है हमें काफी सारा सहारा भी है। और हम उम्मीद करते हैं अपनी गवर्नमेंट से, अपनी सरकार से और अक़वामी मुत्तहिदा से कि वो जो है इन हमारी गवर्नमेंट के ऊपर प्रेशर डाले कि हमें जो है वो बराबरी के और हमारे मजहबी जो है वो हमारे हकूक दिए जाएं और हमें बराबरी का जो है वो एक हिस्सा मिलना चाहिए। हम भी इंसान हैं तो हम भी इंसानियत की तरह जीना चाहते हैं, तो कोई इसमें नहीं होना चाहिए कि ये है इनका मजहब ये है तो इनके साथ ऐसा हो और ये इनका मजहब ये है तो इनका मजहब इनके साथ ऐसा डिस्क्रिमिनेशन हो। तो हम चाहते हैं कि हम पहले इंसान हैं तो इंसान के साथ इंसान का रवैया, इंसान के साथ इंसान का दर्स और बराबरी होनी चाहिए।
थैंक यू, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया राधा जी आपके टाइम के लिए। मैं पता है कि आप फील्ड में और फील्ड से ज्वाइन करना काफी मुश्किल है। In the end, I would like to invite Rimsha Shahid, Research Analyst at SARIM, for presenting end notes. Please, you may proceed now, Ms. Rimsha Shahid.
So, thank you so much, Purkho, for inviting me. Before wrapping up the discussion, I would first like to thank you all the panelists for sparing their time for making an insightful discussion. You all have really underlined the key facts regarding the significance and the role of regional organization in making interfaith harmony prevalent throughout South Asian region. While concluding the discourse, I will sum up the views that has been discussed by our speakers. Firstly, Dr. Sanam Roohi, she discussed her observation during the period of COVID-19 when a lot of narratives were built highlighting the role of virtual violence. Her discussion emphasized the instances emerged during pandemic with specific reference to Islamophobic sentiment, followed by socio-economic boycott of Muslims, otherization of Muslim community, curbing everyday activities, making them economically deprived. Moreover, her discussion focused on somatic nationalism, embody leads to healthy Hindu nation. This term also deals with saying that Muslims, the major minority community of India, is spreading virus, impurities, contaminating the environment. Thus, somatic nationalism exceeds that Hindu are warriors and Muslims are virus spreaders. Then the discussion followed by Leslie Martin, who shared about the persecution of minorities in South Asia with a specific reference to Muslims and Dalits, who are considered as the disgraced community and the untouchable part of society. Stigmatization against Muslims and Dalits in India is heavily instilled within the mindset of Indian society. While discussing the pandemic times, he uttered that both the communities were stigmatized even in providing healthcare services. Moreover, supremacy in the very country has taken a shape where it is normal to tone down the dignity of a Dalit just because they belong to the lower tier of socially constructed caste hierarchy. As far as religious communities are concerned, Muslims and Christians are also deprived of fundamental rights. Thus, the global and regional bodies needs to address the core issues like sexual-oriented practices, communal rights, patriarchal mindset, interfaith friction, and caste-based prejudice. Moreover, to mitigate the difference, there is a dire need to organize open discussion. Moreover, media's role is also very important as their narratives are being heard heavily. Thus, both social and mainstream media can remarkably contribute in making interfaith harmony prevalent in South Asian region. Our last speaker, Ms. Radha, Bheel, opined that though organizations are working diligently in eradicating the issues, but still problems are still at hand in terms of discrimination, be it social, economic, cultural, and religious. She discussed that the major problems are minor girls' abduction, forced marriages, religious conversion, or lack of employment opportunities. And sadly, the speedy justice are not ensured. With regard to rural areas, prime reason of such practices are feudal system and feudal lords who plays on their power and influence, resulting in depriving the poor ones. So, as far as the objective of this webinar is concerned, in the contemporary times, regional organizations are supposed to be increasingly involved in protecting constitutionalism with a specific reference to protecting the minority rights at the national as well as regional level. Several regional organizations have developed legal frameworks and policies to uphold fundamental constitutional values, including the rule of law, democracy, and the protection of human rights. However, these organizations are lagging far behind in ensuring interfaith harmony. I personally believe that one of the prime obligations of regional organization to protect the constitutional order is all its member states. It would not be fitting for a regional organization to not hold accountable their member states of their committing violations against human or more specifically minority rights. An intervention of regional bodies is necessary if foundational values were violated in a sufficiently serious manner in a member state. Moreover, in making social cohesion to promote interfaith harmony, there are three different concerns that I believe an organization should seriously think about. First, a regional organization may act to prevent or address a faith-based security crisis that has possible regional implications and can threaten the security of neighboring states. Second, when negotiating a regional treaty, the involvement in national constitution enforcement can thus be viewed as efforts from a regional body to assist member states comply with their regional obligations and commitments to ensure the rights of minorities. Third, a regional intervention may be the only available option for upholding constitutionalism in a member state. For example, if the national constitutional order is overthrown or undermined to such extent that no other branch of government can hold the infringing power in check. If the discussed points or the above discussed points are considered on a serious note, the results will most possible yield an environment and surrounding of interfaith harmony among all these states. As Heman has also discussed that with a wide range of diverse communities and societies, there always emerge certain misunderstanding and conflicts among different groups, in South Asia being one of a very diverse region is no exception to this, be it sectarian or communal violence, the language riots, religious discrimination, or caste marginalization is sort of a normal thing. Therefore, it is essential to start efforts in promoting interfaith harmony at grassroots level to attain social cohesion, and most possibly this can be achieved through the will and efforts of regional organizations who are promoting the significance of social harmony in peace building. In a nutshell, achieving interfaith harmony in South Asian region is possible. The only thing which is required is, rather than just talking about initiatives, the concerned body need to start the walk in order to bring social cohesion and to normalize diversity acceptance. And last, I would again like to thank you all for your presence and for sharing your views to our platform and helping us in advancing this cause. We hope that the collaboration will grow further with you all. And last, I would like to appreciate Heman and Purkho for efficiently moderating the webinar, and a big thumbs up to the team of SARIM for making this webinar happen. Wish you all a good day and good luck for the future endeavors. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye all.